Billy Carson mentioned that in the Sinai Bible, I don't even know, I never heard that Jesus was not crucified. Crazy action for a mother to take. But I get it, like, your kid is eventually gonna get murdered. And they have a meaning behind it. Let's see what 6 is. The number of man, including the falling nature of man and the works of a fallen man and the evil of men, which is... What's up, everybody? How's it going? This is Jeff with the WWA, the Walk with Armor podcast, bringing you another episode and just bringing you my daily life, just giving you a little update of what's going on. My son is about to be 1 year old. You know, he was born right around Christmas time, December 27th, and it's fascinating. You know, he's about to be a whole year, and I've gone through this one time before with my daughter, and you know, they say what they say is true. It goes so quick, you know, but we're taking pictures of this boy every day and we see him growing every single day. There's sometimes when I go to his crib the next day and I'm like, he wasn't like this yesterday. Like, he's getting big. He's like half of my size now, only, you know, not even a year old. And, you know, he's such a cute, handsome boy. When I look at him, you know, same thing when I look at my daughter, I'm just like, man, where did they get these looks from? Because it definitely didn't come from me. And, you know, a lot of people do say that because he has like blue eyes and blonde hair, and so does Bella. So I don't know. God bless me with such beautiful, angelic looking babies, and I'm in trouble. You know, I'm in trouble. But needless to say, it's been such a blessing, such a great ride. You know, parenthood is not, you know, easy, but it's fulfilling. And you can't imagine life without your babies. They drive you crazy, yeah, of course. They constantly ask you stuff. You know, Belly is getting to the age where she's like asking everything. She's at that why stage. Why does this happen? Well, because, you know, because it rain. That's why there's water all over the place. Well, why does it rain? Well, there's a whole science behind it, but, you know, it's for the plants. You know, the plants, you know, they get their nutrients from the rain and sun. Well, why do they need that? It's like, ugh. Okay, let me go back in the science book. And I'm like researching stuff, knowing that she's not gonna care. She's not gonna retain this. She's just at that why stage. Why? And, you know, it's good. I actually love it because it puts me on kind of like I gotta be on my game. You know, I'm here to provide her answers. I'm here to guide her little mind into knowledge, you know, give her some experience. And it even says in the Bible that we ought to be like children. So Matthew 18, 1-3, rank in the kingdom. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he called a child to himself and set him before them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like a child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles themselves as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me." Yeah, so not only are they pure, but they're not like contaminated by life and what some of this world has to offer. And it's good to ask why, you know, and it's good to seek that knowledge, seek the truth. You can't trust anybody over your parents. They give you that unconditional love. Being a parent now, I know I have to be the bearer of bad news sometimes. Maybe, you know, my kids are acting, you know, silly goose, jumping on the bed, you know, and I love it. I love the laughs. I love the smiles. It like warms my heart. But when I see a little too much energy, it's like, hey, be careful. You might fall off the bed. And that's not good. You're going to get a boo-boo. You know, sometimes they listen, sometimes they simmer down, but sometimes they're just like silly goose mode. They're just like all over the place. Their eyes are just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they're just having a blast. And then, boom, they fall. And, you know, you got to go over to them and not make them feel like, I told you, you don't listen. You just go to them and be there, comfort them. You know, they're in a bad place. Like, they know they did wrong. And, you know, Bella sometimes, she's like, I'm sorry. And I'm just like, oh, man. Like, that is something you should feel. But as a parent, you just give them that unconditional love. And you're like, you don't got to say sorry. Like, you're just a kid. Being a kid. I was there. You know, you're just having a good time. Like, I completely understand. But also, you got to be the one to discipline them when the time's right, you know? And it's not easy, but you got to be the one to lay down manners in them, because you don't want them to be like just loose, just a loose cannon, just derailed. There's no structure. There's no like foundation. There's nothing that's kind of holding them back from certain things. And that's how we are. We need that discipline. We need that structure. We need Jesus to put us in the right path. And that's why he left the Holy Spirit behind. That way we feel that guilt. We feel that and we repent. We say, I'm sorry. Even though I knew what I was doing was wrong, I still did it. Not only did I know it was wrong and I did it, but I knew that I was gonna come to you and apologize. And it becomes like a vicious cycle. And if you love your parents, same way, if you love Jesus, you're not always gonna want to do that cycle. Eventually, you're gonna be like, this is not a good relationship. I keep falling, I keep messing up, and I know that even though I keep messing up, I know that I'm gonna go to him and apologize. He's gonna forgive me, and I know I'm gonna do it again, and I know I'm gonna apologize again, making him feel bad. It takes a little time to build that relationship, you know? It takes a little time to kind of know, like, why am I doing that? What thrill do I get out of that? That temporary joy, like, but knowing that I'm gonna feel that guilt, feel that Holy Spirit knocking at my heart, like, hey, you know this is wrong. Why do you keep doing this? You know, your Father loves you. He doesn't want to see you go down this route no more. But he'll leave you to your own devices, and he's not gonna force you to follow him. You'll never see Jesus in heaven like, hey, come here. You better come up here. No. You run away from him and disrespect him long enough, he's gonna, okay, you want to live life separate with me? You'll live eternity separate from me. And it's like that. Repentance is important. Just like how it says in the Bible, Jesus will forgive multiple times. And one of the apostles actually questioned this. And let's look into that. Matthew 18, verse 21 to 22. The parable of the unforgiving debtor. Then Peter came to him and asked, Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. That's like an infinity when it comes from the mouth of Jesus. Because the number 7 means complete. You know, there's certain numbers in the Bible that mean certain things, and I don't remember all of them. But 7 means complete. I know 40 means a test. Like for example, Jesus went in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and that's when, you know, the devil tempted him. That was a test. David and Goliath. Goliath marched around taunting the Israelites for 40 days and 40 nights. The Israelites traveled through Moses through Exodus for 40 years, and it was a bunch of tests in that time. Let's see what 12 means. All right, God's perfect government. Ooh, that's good. That's good because, the 12 tribes of Israel, that's, Jacob's children. They made the 12 tribes, 12 disciples. All right, so 40, like I mentioned before, 40 means trials, probation, testing, and preparation. And there's a couple of other numbers in here that get repeated in the Bible multiple times, and they have a meaning behind it. Let's see what 6 is. The number of man, including the falling nature of man and the works of a fallen man and the evil of men, which is 666. Everybody knows that one. All right, 7, God's number of completion, perfection, and rest. And there's a bunch of different examples of that. So there's a ton of examples of numbers in the Bible. It's very interesting. Okay, so yeah, back to forgiveness. Like, God always forgives. God is here for us. He's here to protect us and here to kind of see us through the tests and the trials. And he wants to complete our journey. And that's beautiful. I love that. Switching subjects here. I don't know if anybody follows any type of podcasters, Christian podcasters, but in recent times, there's been a video that surfaced between a gentleman by the name of Billy Carson, right? Billy Carson is known for a lot of things that kind of go against Bible beliefs and kind of like talks about how certain Bible verses or things in the Bible were taken from other ancient Egyptian scriptures, and how angels are not really like angels, they're more like aliens and extraterrestrials, and they came down here to have children with human women and teach them knowledge and all this craziness. In my eyes, that's all craziness. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's been on a couple different big platforms. This past couple weeks, he actually got on a live stream with a biblical scholar. Not only was this guy a theologian, but he studies biblical archaeology, meaning like your manuscripts and all of that stuff. I highly advise people to check it out, because even though this gentleman Billy Carson has been all over and nobody really had anything to say on the stuff that he would bring up in conversation, he always challenged anybody to debate him. But all the hosts of these podcasts, they're not people that study the Bible. So he said any pastor, any priest, and anybody that thinks they could debunk what I'm saying, I invite them. Open invitation, anybody. Unlucky for him, he found his match for sure. I wouldn't even put it in those terms, because this gentleman, Wes Huff, he came in kind of guns blazing. They were talking about, Billy Carson mentioned that in the Sinai Bible, I don't even know, I never heard that Jesus was not crucified.
According to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James Version of the Bible. And the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which, according to some scholars, is a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more, if that's true, it adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified.
I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James version being put out.
Sure. So, when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library, so you can go and see it. It's on display, and the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here, and the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just a Greek. It's a 4th century Greek manuscript.
Mhm.
It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD, and its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So, my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27,
Mhm.
where it has Jesus being crucified, and that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my
Ca-
my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently.
Sinai Bible, was that where was that
I
piece
found the
discovered?
text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Huh?
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So, at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish.
Yeah, you're not gonna have a guy that studies these papyrus manuscripts that we found back in the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's just not gonna happen. This guy, he's about to get his doctorate's degree on this, but I highly recommend watching it. It was a great video and just filled with just knowledge. It was compacted with knowledge that I just whoa. But there's so many, you know, there's so many things out there that I don't know if you ever heard of, the banded books of the Bible. A lot of people study these things and they take it true. They take the word for this over the actual canon Bible. They look past those 66 books. And I actually have a list of certain banded books that never made it into the Bible because they either contradict what some of the books in the Bible are saying, or they're just not really falling in line with the truth or the message. So you have your Gospel of Thomas, your Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Apocalypse of Peter, which is a brutal book, I heard. Book of Enoch. I mean, a lot of people have heard the Book of Enoch. Testament of Solomon, Gospel of Barnabas, Gospel of Jesus' wife. And there's a few more banded books that just never made it into the Bible. They call them the lost books. But do your own research on those. I can't speak too heavy on them. I only heard before this past 2 weeks. I only heard 2 of them before, but they carry certain things that we just don't believe. Another thing I wanted to mention was people kind of rag on the Bible because they say it's man-made, right? And they say oh, we don't even have the copy. I mean, we don't even have the original books. These are all just copies. But when you really think about it, the fact that it is copies makes it more accurate than it being the original. Like Matthew wrote Matthew and we have what Matthew wrote. Anybody could edit that, before it came to us. But the fact that there's copies of copies of copies of copies, let's say across, Asia and Northern Africa and Middle East and Western Europe, like, let's say these places, if there was somebody that wanted to change something, they would need to like coordinate with all these different kings or sultans or different prime ministers or presidents or whatever they have out there to all change it together. Like, let's say somebody in Spain wanted to, like, they didn't agree with a lot of the stuff in the Bible, and they're like, we're gonna take that out. And it's like, good luck trying to pass that as truth, because there's copies everywhere on this. So how are you supposed to change that? These copies made it so far out that my bad, I just hit my screen. The copies made it so far out that it's impossible to kind of like alter it, and they all kind of stay true to the main message. They all kind of coordinate, and they all kind of like fall in line with each other. So I just find that kind of interesting, and the fact that people say it's man-made, and this is something that it's just a book of like lies, just made up stories. But if that's the case, then why did they write out these apostles to be so questionable? Not only questionable individuals that were chosen to follow God and then disciple others, but they also ask so many questions. Like, Jesus would have like a speech and parables, and they'll be like, explain that to us, because I don't get it. Or the doubting. Thomas was a doubter. Peter was a hothead. He didn't have faith. He questioned God, Jesus multiple times. So if this was man-made and made up stories, why have a crew that's following Jesus that are constantly questioning Jesus? I don't know. I found that pretty interesting. Before I go any further, I want to continue the Bible Project, and continue our progress here. We ran through the book of Genesis, short little videos, but kind of the gist of it, and I enjoyed it. And now I want to start the book of Exodus. And here we go.
The book of Exodus. It's the second book of the Bible, and it picks up the storyline from the previous book, Genesis, which ended with Abraham's grandson, Jacob, leading his large family of 70 people down to Egypt. Now, Jacob's 11th son, Joseph, had been elevated to second in command over Egypt, and he had saved his whole family in a famine. And so Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, offered the family to come live there as a safe haven. And so eventually Jacob dies there in Egypt, and Joseph and all his brothers do too. About 400 years pass, and the story of the Exodus begins. Now, that name refers to the event that takes place in the first half of the book, Israel's exodus from Egypt. But the book has a second half that takes place at the foot of Mount Sinai. In this video, we'll just focus on the first half, where centuries have passed, and the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied, and they filled the land. Now, this line is a deliberate echo back to the blessing that God gave all humanity back in the Garden of Eden. And it reminds us of the big biblical story so far. Humanity forfeited God's blessing through sin and rebellion, and so God chose Abraham's family as the vehicle through which he would restore his blessing to all the world. But the new Pharaoh does not view Israel as a blessing. He actually thinks this growing Israelite immigrant group is a threat to his power. And so just as in Genesis, humanity rebels against God's blessing, so here, Pharaoh attempts to destroy the source of God's blessing, the Israelites. He brutally enslaves them in forced labor, and then he orders that all the Israelite boys be drowned in the Nile River. Now, Pharaoh, he is the worst character in the Bible so far. His kingdom epitomizes humanity's rebellion against God. Pharaoh has so redefined good and evil according to his own interests that even the murder of innocent children has become good to him. And so Egypt has become worse than Babylon from the book of Genesis. And so now Israel cries out for help against this new Babylon, and God responds. God first turns Pharaoh's evil upside down, as an Israelite mother throws her boy into the Nile River, but in a basket. And so he floats safely right down into Pharaoh's own family. He's named Moses, and he grows up to eventually become the man that God will use to defeat Pharaoh's evil. In the famous story of the burning bush, God appears...
That's a crazy action for a mother to take. But I get it. Like, your kid is eventually going to get murdered from Pharaoh. He was wiping out all the Israelites because they were just getting so big. You know, they were all over the place. And Pharaoh's like, how the heck did we bring these people here? And now they're like becoming like bigger than us. Yeah, off with them. Can't really have this no more. But you know, I just thought that was always interesting that Moses' mother was just like, I'm gonna take a chance here, drop him in a river. But you know, God has a plan.
To Moses and commissions him to go to Pharaoh and order him to release the Israelites. And God says that he knows Pharaoh will resist, and so he will bring his judgment on Egypt in the form of plagues. Then God also says that he will harden Pharaoh's heart. And so we're introduced into the next main part of the story, the confrontation between God and Pharaoh. Now, what does this mean that God says he'll harden Pharaoh's heart? It's super important to read this section of the story really closely and in sequence. In Moses and Pharaoh's first encounter, we're told simply that Pharaoh's heart grew hard. There's no implication that God did anything. And so in response, God sends the first set of 5 plagues, each one confronting Pharaoh and one of his Egyptian gods.
Crazy.
And each time, Moses offers a chance for Pharaoh to humble himself and to let the Israelites go. But after each plague, we're told that Pharaoh either hardened his heart or that his heart grew hard. He's doing this of his own will. And so eventually, it's with the second set of 5 plagues that we begin to hear how God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So the point of the story seems to be this. Even though God knew that Pharaoh would resist his will, God still offered him all of these chances to do the right thing. But eventually, Pharaoh's evil reaches a point of no return. I mean, even his own advisors think that he has lost his mind. And it's at that point that God takes over and bends Pharaoh's evil towards his own redemptive purposes. God lures Pharaoh into his own destruction as he saves his people, which is what happens next. With the final plague, it's the night of Passover, and God turns the tables on Pharaoh. Just as he killed the sons of the Israelites, so God will kill the firstborn in Egypt with a final plague. But unlike Pharaoh, God provides a means of escape through the blood of the Lamb. And here the story stops and introduces us in detail to the annual Israelite ritual of Passover. On the night before Israel left Egypt, they sacrificed a young, spotless lamb and painted its blood on the doorframe of their house. And when the divine plague came over Egypt, the houses covered with the blood of the lamb were passed over, and the son spared. And so every year since, the Israelites have reenacted that night to remember and to celebrate God's justice and his mercy. But Pharaoh, because of his pride and rebellion, he loses his own son, and he's compelled to finally let the Israelites go free. And so the Israelite slaves make their exodus from Egypt. But no sooner do they leave that Pharaoh changes his mind, and he gathers his army and chases after the Israelites for a final showdown. As the Israelites pass through the waters of the sea safely, Pharaoh charges towards his own destruction. The Exodus story concludes with the first song of praise in the Bible. It's called the Song of the Sea. And the final line declares that the Lord reigns as king. And then the song retells in poetry what the story of God's kingdom is all about. It's about how God is on a mission to confront evil in his world and to redeem those who are enslaved to evil. God is going to bring his people into the promised land where his divine presence will live among them. This story is what it looks like when God becomes king over his people. So after the Israelites sing their song, the story takes a sharp turn. The Israelites, they're trekking through the wilderness on their way to Mount Sinai, and they're hungry, they're thirsty, and they start criticizing Moses and God for even rescuing them. They say they long for the good old days in Egypt. I mean, it's crazy. So God graciously provides food and water for Israel in the wilderness, but these stories, they cast a dark shadow. And we begin to wonder, could it be that Israel's heart is just as hard as Pharaoh's? We shall see. But for now, that's the first half of the book of Exodus.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. That is the first part of the book of Exodus, and you know, a lot of stuff happened in this book. Then they're gonna start the journey into the wilderness and just the stuff that go on and the stuff that you learn. And you know, this is the second book in the Torah. They got the 5 books, you know, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. I think it's Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. But this is where a lot of faith building, a lot of foundation gets implemented in the works. I hope you guys have a great week, great weekend, happy holidays, and enjoy this time with your family, everyone. Peace, love you, good night.